The grid system lie is the dark secret holding modern production sailboats together, and it is why modern hulls are literally snapping in half. You walk into a 2026 boat show and see a shiny, wide-open interior, but underneath that floor is a pre-molded fiberglass grid glued into place with nothing but structural adhesive. In the 1970s, solid glass hulls were built with bulkheads tabbed directly to the skin, creating a monolithic structure. But today, builders use a liner system to save labor costs, creating a boat that is stiff in a showroom but brittle in a seaway. We are investigating the total loss failure that happens when a grid detaches from the hull. This defect is often invisible until your keel starts to wobble. Are you sailing a vessel with a true structural skeleton, or are you floating in a high-priced IKEA cabinet glued to a hull? Step into the hull of a West Sail 32 and you're surrounded by a different philosophy, one that treats a sailboat not as a disposable product, but as a permanent ocean-going structure. The hull here is solid polyester fiberglass laid up by hand in thick, overlapping layers. Midships, the laminate is a full 20 millimeters, nearly an inch of solid glass, no core, no foam, nothing to rot or delaminate. At the keel, the thickness increases again, a silent promise that this boat was built to shrug off groundings that would total a modern yacht before the insurance adjuster even arrives. Bulkheads in the West Sail aren't just furniture. Each one is anchored to the hull with double staggered steel plates spaced every 12 inches, then sandwiched between two layers of quarter-inch glass. The tabbing is slow-cure polyester, allowed to set for hours, sometimes overnight, so the bond becomes part of the hull itself. Quality control logs from the original West Sail shop show every tab was checked with a wet film thickness gauge before curing, an old-school ritual, but one that means even 40-year-old hulls rarely show more than a hairline crack where a modern grid would have already let go. Pacific Seacraft took this logic even further. Their 37-footers use an X pattern of glass epoxy tabs, each 30 millimeters wide and 6 millimeters thick, spaced every 200 millimeters, about 8 inches. Every bulkhead is a solid glass block, tab bonded on all four sides, corners laced with that X pattern for redundancy. The result is a continuous sandwich, inner liner to outer hull, that resists torsion and flex. Failures are almost unheard of. When they do happen, it's usually from a collision, not from the slow, invisible rot of a failed adhesive bond. In these boats, the sound is unmistakable, a dull, lead-heavy thud when you knock on the hull, not the hollow, plasticky thump of a lined grid system. Owners describe the difference in almost reverent tones. These are the iron monuments, the sovereign sailors' hulls, built for blue water, not for the showroom. The numbers tell the same story. 40 years on, West Sail and Pacific Seacraft hulls are still crossing oceans, their tabbed bulkheads and thick glass as solid as the day they left the mold. The accountant's boat may look sleeker, but when the sea turns ugly, it's the immortal hull that endures. Run your knuckles along the inside of a West Sail, and the story changes from theory to certainty. There is a ritual among old shipwrights, the tap test. You curl your fist, give the hull a sharp rap below the waterline, and listen. What you hear is not the hollow, plasticky thump of a lined hull, but a sound so dense it seems to absorb the blow. A dull, lead-heavy thud that tells you this hull is one continuous piece, not a patchwork of panels or a grid glued in after the fact. Field recordings show that signature frequency band never rises above 250 Hz. It is the audio fingerprint of a monolith. I have watched owners, some with salt in their beards, some with spreadsheets on their phones, knock their way down the hull with their eyes closed, and they trust their ears over any builder's sales pitch. They will say, "This boat does not just feel solid, it is solid." One owner, a retired naval architect, summed it up best. "The sea does not care what you paid, it cares what you built." There is a mindset here that is almost extinct. You see it in the way these boats age. The gel coat may craze, the teak may silver, but the structure underneath remains stubbornly intact. Owners talk about their hulls like old friends or family heirlooms meant to outlive not just one generation, but two or three. One Pacific Seacraft builder, when pressed on why they overbuilt every bulkhead, shrugged and said, "We build for the century, not the season." You can measure laminate thickness, cite tab schedules, or recite QC logs, but in the end, the tap test is the proof. It is a language of touch and sound, a direct line to the builder's intent. The accountant's boat may win on paper, but the immortal hull wins when you trust your life to it, year after year, storm after storm. That is the difference you feel, not just in numbers, but in your bones. In the forensic lab, the truth is written not in sales brochures, but in the brittle snap of a failed bond and the acrid chemical stench of ground methacrylate. The story of modern hull construction comes down to chemistry and the difference between what is promised and what is real. A builder might boast, "Modern boats are made of glued-together cardboard." That is the hyperbole. The pedantic truth is more unsettling. The grid systems in today's production yachts use high-modulus methacrylate adhesives, for example Plexus, whose tensile strength on paper exceeds that of the fiberglass itself. In a lab, you can pull a dog bone coupon to 20 megapascals and watch the glass fail before the glue does. But that is only half the story. The real weakness lies where the adhesive meets the hull's cured polyester skin, the so-called secondary bond. This is not a chemical marriage. It is a handshake across a cold, inert surface. The glue cannot truly bite into the cured resin, so it relies on surface energy, roughness, and hope. A marine adhesive chemist, someone who has spent more time in nitrile gloves than on deck, can show the difference with a peel test. Take a strip of grid, bond it to a cured hull panel, and pull at 90 degrees. The average peel strength clocks in at just 1.8 megapascals. Compare that to the tensile strength of a primary layup, 20 megapascals or more, and the gap is obvious. On a graph, the peel curve looks like a gentle slope, not a cliff. It is a slow, reluctant failure, the interface giving up over centimeters instead of snapping clean. In the real world, that means a hard grounding or a decade of flexing seas can start a crack at the grid hull interface, and that crack will quietly grow with every wave. The chemist's bench is littered with failed coupons, some delaminated after a simple water soak, others peeled apart with a groan that echoes the hollow plasticky thump of a lined hull. The numbers are cold, 1.8 megapascals for the secondary bond, sometimes less after thermal cycling or a bit of moisture. That is the silent flaw hiding beneath the glossy finish. The difference between a true structural skeleton and a high-priced IKEA cabinet glued to a hull is measured not in showroom stiffness, but in the molecular handshake at the interface. Are you trusting your life to a bond that is as strong as the hull itself, or to a thin film of adhesive clinging to a surface that never wanted to be joined? The industry sells strength by the number, but the sea tests it at the interface. When the bond fails, the accountant's boat becomes an IKEA boat, one hard knock away from grid detachment and a total loss. The immortal hull, by contrast, never relied on a secondary bond at all. Its strength is baked in, not glued on. Step onto the carpeted sole of a 2026 showboat and the illusion is seamless. Sunlight streams through wide windows, bouncing off pale oak and glossy white cabinetry. The interior feels endless, open, uncluttered, more Manhattan loft than seagoing vessel. Where older blue water boats like Westsail or Pacific Seacraft wrapped you in solid bulkheads and tabbed glass, these new models hide their structure. The hull's grid, the supposed backbone, is buried behind thin partitions, furniture panels masquerading as strength. It is all glued together with methacrylate adhesive, out of sight and out of mind. The result is a showroom dazzler, a yacht that feels expansive, but whose integrity depends on a bond most owners never see and few ever question. At the Brussels International Boat Show in February 2026, Beneteau and Jeannot revealed their latest models. Not a bulkhead in sight from bow to stern, just a sweep of open floor and modular furniture. Sales teams talk up engineered grids and advanced adhesives, but technical data is scarce. Instead, buyers get a menu of reconfigurable salons and hidden storage, all bolted to the liner, not tabbed to the hull. The open interior, with no visible bulkheads, became the new standard for mass-market yachts that year. For those who know what to look for, the warning signs are clear. Owner forums circulate red flag checklists. Are there visible, tabbed bulkheads? Can you spot glassed-in knees or stringers? Does anything structural move when pressed? If not, you are likely looking at a furniture bulkhead, an interior wall that carries no real load, only as strong as the glue behind it. The checklist is short and unforgiving. Knock on the hull. A hollow, plasticky thump means grid and liner. A dull, heavy thud means solid glass. Open lockers and look behind panels. Do you see glass tabbing or just a seam of white adhesive? Push on the furniture bulkhead. Any flex or creak signals a failing bond. Ask for a bond test certificate and adhesive batch number. No paperwork, no deal. At the show, buyers rapped knuckles along hulls, puzzled by the hollow sound. One remarked, "It feels like a hotel room, not a boat." Another called it glued-together cardboard. The real weakness is the secondary bond, glue-meeting cured polyester, a handshake that can fail quietly after a single grounding or years of flex. The 2026 showroom offers surface perfection and hidden compromise, where the difference is not just what you see, but what you hear and what you trust. Beneath the cabin sole of the Beneteau 46, the evidence is immediate. Torn adhesive traces the outline of a grid that's no longer bonded, while the keel rocks with a looseness that should not exist. Chain of custody logs confirm the Surveyor's first infrared thermography scan, a 300mm delamination zone running forward of the mast step along the port grid rib. The infrared images reveal a feverish patchwork, hot spots where the grid has peeled away, cold voids where water has crept between liner and hull. Peel coupon samples from the failed area tell the rest. The lab certificate reads 1.8 megapascals, far below the 3 megapascals standard now under ISO review. The secondary bond, a thin film of methacrylate adhesive, depended on surface roughness and luck to keep the grid attached to the cured polyester hull. Under the strain of a gale, it failed, and the grid, meant to be the boat's backbone, became just another loose component. The sensory cues are unmistakable. A hollow plasticky thump replaces the solid thud of true glass. The sharp chemical smell of ground methacrylate lingers, a reminder that this was never a chemical marriage, just a cold handshake that failed under stress. Keel bolts, once torqued to specification, now shift as the grid floats free. The insurer's file is blunt. Total loss, £1.9 million in damages, with no repair path. The numbers in the lab match the numbers on the claim. This is not theory, but the forensic reality of a hull built to look strong, but never meant to last. 7 yachts. That is the number that forced the industry's hand. 7 modern production hulls written off as total losses for grid detachment between January 2025 and March 2026. Each one a 6 or 7 figure claim, not from collision or fire, but from the quiet, catastrophic failure of a bond line most owners never see. Insurance adjusters' files read like a pattern. Beneteau, Jeannot, Hans, boats less than 5 years old, all built with the same pre-molded grid system, all relying on secondary bonds that peeled away from the hull after a hard knock or just a few seasons of flex. Losses totaled over £10 million in that window alone. Underwriting manuals now flag grid-dependent hull as a risk class. Premiums have jumped 12% for any vessel over 3 years old without a certified secondary bond inspection. Insurers demand disclosure of the exact adhesive system, batch number, and installation record before quoting a policy. If the owner cannot produce a bond test certificate, the boat is either uninsurable or subject to a surcharge that puts it out of reach for most buyers. The numbers are driving these changes. Grid detachment claims, though rare at about 0.05% of all Beneteau Group hulls since 2015, now account for nearly a fifth of all hull-related total loss payouts. The regulatory world is scrambling to catch up. ISO's working group has drafted Clause 5.7.3, which would force every builder to meet a minimum 3 megapascal peel strength on all secondary bonded structures. The committee minutes are blunt, manufacturers protest the cost, but surveyors and insurers point to the data. In the lab, average peel strength for current fast-set adhesives is just 1.8 megapascal. Until the rule passes, the gap between showroom promise and sea trial reality remains wide, and every policy renewal, every rejected claim, ratchets the pressure higher. The accountant's boat may win on paper, but the insurance market is no longer buying the illusion. Start with your hands, not your wallet. Every surveyor knows the tap test is the first line of defense. Use a small hammer or even your knuckles. Work your way down the hull, from the waterline to the keel grid, listening for the difference. A dull, lead-heavy thud signals solid glass, but a hollow, plasticky thump means you are knocking on a liner or a grid. Mark any section that sounds hollow. That is where grid detachment could be lurking. Next, demand documentation. Ask the seller for the bond test certificate on the secondary grid adhesive. If they cannot produce a lab peel test showing at least 3 megapascals, walk away. The standard is clear. Anything below that threshold means the bond may already be failing or could let go with the next hard knock. Insist on adhesive batch numbers and installation records. No paperwork, no deal. Bring a surveyor equipped for non-destructive testing. Infrared. Thermography can reveal hidden delamination. Look for hotspots along grid ribs, especially near the mast step and keel bolts. Ultrasonic C-scan maps bond thickness, flag any region under 0.5 millimeter. If the seller objects to a coupon peel sample, that is another red flag. Serious buyers get serious evidence. Don't stop at the hull. Open every locker and panel. Look for glass tabbing, not just a bead of white adhesive. Push on furniture bulkheads. Any flex or creak is a warning. The checklist is not just a formality, it is the difference between buying an immortal hull and stepping into an IKEA boat with a ticking clock. Trust the data, not the sales pitch. To some, the idea of the sovereign sailor is more than nostalgia, it's a statement of intent. Choosing a hull that will outlast its first owner isn't just about pride, it's about refusing to hand your fate or your family's to the lowest bidder. The culture that built the Westsail and Pacific Seacraft saw durability as an ethical boundary, not an optional upgrade. For them, a boat was an extension of personal sovereignty, freedom from the whims of fashion, and from the actuarial tables of the insurance market. Now, insurers have caught up to this ethos, but with a price tag. A certified, tabbed, monolithic hull can earn its owner a 10% reduction on annual premiums, an acknowledgement that true durability lowers risk for everyone. The rebate is not a marketing ploy, it's a recognition that a hull built for the century is less likely to become a six-figure loss. The numbers are simple, but the values run deeper. When the market rewards the immortal hull, it's not just about economics, it's a quiet endorsement of the sovereign sailor's code. So the question comes back again and again. Are you buying a disposable product or a vessel meant to be handed down? The sea doesn't care about your surveyor's certificate or your insurance rebate. But the people who write the checks and the ones who stand to lose the most are starting to care a great deal. In the end, the real premium isn't what you pay, it's what you trust. Today, the difference between a hollow, plasticky thump and a lead-heavy thud is more than sound. It is the line between a disposable IKEA boat and an iron monument. As insurers retreat and grid detachment turns $400,000 hulls into landfill, the real question remains, will you trust your life to a hull built for accountants or for sovereign sailors? The sea never accepts secondary bonds. Drop your perspective below.